All right, I want to talk about money. What is money? Well, money's an interesting thing to me because it's this, we think of money as a piece of paper. It's just a dollar bill, a $10 bill, a $20 bill. But what gives it value? Why do we think it's worth something? It's just a piece of paper, right? So this is an interesting subject to me. What is money? Let's just think about what came before money. Maybe, thousands of years ago, in some ancient civilization, we might have had some farmers. You might all been farmers, and you might have a couple of chickens, and you might want to get uh, 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 some beef from another farmer. Maybe he's got a cow. So you might say, tell you what, I'm going to change. I can exchange these chickens for a cow. And the other farmer would say, okay, how many chickens? And you'd say, like 40 chickens. And you'd sit there and barter back and forth. Um, so bartering is a way of exchanging things and having transactions, but it's not very efficient. Supposing you only want a half of a cow. Well, you can't divide a cow up necessarily, so it might be difficult to do those things. So what we do is we come up with money. Civilizations over time have developed this concept of money where we can exchange money instead of the actual goods. So if I wanted to sell some chickens to some guy, he might give me some money in exchange, and I give him the chickens. The idea is that money, though, can then be used to purchase other things because everybody believes it has value. So money becomes a placeholder for things of value. It's something that sort of holds the place of that of an asset. Okay, so let's think about that for just a second. What are the main functions of money? And I think it'll give you a better idea of what money is when we look at this. It is a medium of exchange. It's that placeholder so we can exchange things and we can get assets in return. It's a standard of value because we all know what a dollar is. We all know what $10 is. We know about what that would purchase. So it becomes a standard that we can use to measure the value of things. And lastly, it's a store of value. It's a store of value. So even though the farmer, you gave the farmer some chickens, he gave you $100, let's just say, you've got value there. That has value. That $100 has value. Let's talk about how that works. Well, money, here are the characteristics of money, and this is how it gets value. First of all, there's acceptability or faith. This is one I've added because I just want you to bring that out as a characteristic. Everybody has to believe. Everybody has to be a believer in this. You've got to say, I've got $100, and everybody's got to believe it has value, that it'll retain its value. And we've seen some instances where money has lost its value. We see it in many countries sometimes where there's a military coup or something happens and we get hyperinflation, and the money doesn't retain the value anymore, and everybody worries, and there's lots of things like runs on banks. We had it in the 1920s here in the United States. But there's an acceptability that everybody's going to accept that money that we have, whatever we decide to use as a medium of exchange. In order for this to have value, it's got to have some scarcity, and that gives it stability. So I think your book calls it stability or scarcity. Some people use different terms for this, but the idea is that it's got to be limited. There's got to be a limited supply. You got to be able to control the supply. So in the United States, the government controls how much money there is in circulation, and that way it keeps its value. And we'll be learning about the Fed a little bit later, the Federal Reserve Bank of banks and monetary policy. And really, that's all about the government trying to keep the value of money sort of level and stable, and other things as well, but in the economy going. Well, think about shells on the beach. Let's say you're a farmer and you've got these chickens and you want to sell them to somebody, and somebody comes to you and says, hey, I found these shells on the beach. If you're using shells on the beach as a form of currency, it could work, but except there's unlimited supply. I would say, look, I'm not going to give you chickens for shells. You can just go get more shells. There's no value in those shells because there's an unlimited supply. Think about Mardi Gras beads. I'm always interested in that because You know, you go to Mardi Gras parades and they have value. Everybody wants them, you know, and everybody's looking for the big ones and the pretty ones and all sorts of stuff. So that night they have value. The next morning they have no value. It's interesting because we all believe they're going to be they're somewhat valuable. I don't know why that is. It's interesting psychology, but really they aren't valuable because there's so many. You can always get more, and plastic is cheap, and you can make more. But for that evening, there's a scarcity of them. You don't have them, you want them. So it's an interesting. You could use them as a means of exchange. Hey, I'll trade you this for a hot dog, you know, but they probably wouldn't take them. But anyway, there has to be stability in the money supply. It needs to be divisible. In other words, we've got money now. We've got a $100 bill, but then you can divide that to a $20 bill, divide that into two $10 bills, and so forth. That's divisibility, and that's important because, you know, you could use chickens, but what if somebody wanted to half a chicken, right? That would be hard to do. Some other characteristics of money, and these apply to currency or cash, but not all money, as we'll see in just a little bit, is cash. In other words, some money you can put in the bank and it's still your money, and these characteristics wouldn't apply to that type of money. But for cash, for currency, we call it, you know, a $100 bill, it's portable. It's light. It's easy to exchange. If they were huge, if $100 bills weighed a ton, you couldn't really exchange them very well. So money has to be portable. It needs to be difficult to counterfeit, and that goes back to this idea of scarcity here. If they're counterfeited, then the supply increases, so it won't retain its value. So you got to make sure somehow that whatever money you have is not easy to counterfeit. And finally, it needs to be durable. It's got to last, because if it just, you know, evaporated, it wouldn't have any value. Nobody's going to accept it. So dollar bills do wear out, but they get exchanged by the government. The government puts new ones in supply and takes the old ones out over time. So those are some characteristics of money. Let's talk about the three main components of the U.S. money supply. Currency, which is dollar bills, $100 bills, and so forth. In the United States, that's what we use. You know, in Europe, they use euros, right? So other countries and other entities use different types of currency, but we use our currency as dollar bills. So there's another thing called demand deposits, and an example of this would be a checking account. Now, is this money or not? It's kind of interesting. If you take $100 and you put it in your checking account, do you have $100? You know, the bank now has that actual currency. What do you really have? Well, you have a deposit that you made, but you can demand it back, a demand deposit. A checking account is an example of that. So you can go to the bank and get your money back. So it's kind of like a virtual currency at that point. The bank has it, and they may not even actually have the currency, because they may lend that out and things like that, and that gets interesting. But a checking account is an example of a demand deposit. A time deposit would be like a savings account. It's a little, you can't go to the bank and just withdraw everything from savings. I mean, you can, but there's some time that you have to keep it in there. You could move it from savings into checking, and then you could get your money out, but it's a little bit longer, a little less liquid. And we talk about liquidity as well when we talk about money. How easy is it to use as in a transaction, to exchange it for something else? Money, I mean, dollar bills are very easy. Everybody will accept them right off the bat. But a check might not be quite as liquid, and certainly a savings account wouldn't be. So, you know, you can store money in lots of places. You can take your money, for example, and buy an asset, and that's kind of a way of storing your money. Like, for example, you could buy a house. You could buy a car. So if you have $1,000 and you bought a $1,000 car, now where's your money? Well, it's tied up in that car. It's a way of storing that money in a way. But we don't consider the car. We consider it an asset, but it's not really considered money for our purposes. So that's interesting, though, that how we store value in different things. Lastly, I'm going to kind of briefly look at this. There's cryptocurrency. I'll give you another video to watch for that, like Bitcoin. There's gold, there's silver, and there's lots of other currencies out there, of course, by other countries. But cryptocurrency is an interesting one. It's kind of popular now. It's not put out by a government, right? It's just some computer programmers got together, and they came up with a system, and people just see value, and they all agree that it's worth something. That's actually one of the problems, is they don't always all agree, and sometimes it's losing its value. And government actually does a good job of keeping value in the currency and by regulating the monetary supply, the money supply. It keeps it valuable. So cryptocurrency is something else. But that's our quick look at money and currency.